Cool. Started the recording. And can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a good week so far. So we're learning about, let's see, I guess, started with async, like promises and stuff, but didn't actually use that in the homework yet. And um, yeah, so I think today it looks like we had a vote for the DOM, lots of votes for the DOM, and then parsing JSON and accessing the properties of the array. So um, I'll do a kind of a run through the DOM, just like a crash course on that. And then if you all think it would be helpful, I kind of set up like I did the homework assignment for adding messages so that people can leave messages. I did that homework assignment just to kind of get a feel for it. And if you all want, if that sounds good, I'll run through doing that. Um, it'll probably take most of the session, but and then if I have time, I can look into parsing JSON. That should be I don't know if that's necessarily relevant to the homework, but it is an important concept. And if you guys are interested, or if you all are interested, I could do that. So I'll just get started here. I'll screen share. Um, okay, let's see. Share. Turn my notifications off. Focus for an hour. Okay. Cool. So we're recording and everything should be good. Um, so I'll just pull up my slides. I started making slides, but they're super just like just the beginning. So I'll start with the slides, but then we're gonna go into actual code. So because I only have slides for like the very beginning. But so we're gonna talk about the DOM. So far at Code the Dream, you all have learned about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And you started with JavaScript for a while, and it was probably confusing, and there's a lot. JavaScript is, a pretty fully fleshed out language, and um, I think that once you moved on to HTML and CSS, a lot of you probably had a little bit of an easier time. Um, and JavaScript hasn't really tied in yet up until now. So how does JavaScript relate to HTML and CSS? Um, that's what we're going to talk about today. That's the DOM. It allows you to basically use HTML or interact with HTML and CSS within your JavaScript. And so that's the whole point of why you all learned JavaScript. But let's talk about kind of how they all create a web page together. So a common way to think about it is um, for your web page, you have HTML, which is basically the content, and you can think of HTML as being the noun. So what is displayed on your web page? Um, the nouns. So you have like inputs, and you have headings and body text, images. All those things are in HTML. So HTML basically just defines the content, the nouns, what is on your page. CSS could be described as being the adjective. So how does all that stuff look? Is it big, small, uh, red, orange, white, whatever, the colors, the sizes, the spacing, kind of how everything is visually presented is taken care of by CSS, and then JavaScript could be seen as being the verb. So how, like the action, how do these HTML elements, how do these nouns kind of interact with each other, or with like, as I'll get to, we can use data that's out there in the world. Like you could use data stored in a database, and the HTML could actually be created and rendered based on um, other data that you didn't hard code in, you didn't put into your HTML. And so basically, JavaScript gives you the ability to make your web page dynamic. The HTML can move. You can change the CSS properties also with JavaScript. So yeah, it gives it more interactions. And the key to making that all work is the DOM. And DOM is an acronym that stands for Document Object Model. And it's a little bit confusing sounding, but you can think of document as being the HTML. So your index.html, that is your document. Object, well, we learned about objects in JavaScript, and this is the exact same meaning of that word. We're talking about JavaScript objects. So it's a JavaScript object that represents the HTML document, and it's a model. So it's modeling the HTML. So basically in JavaScript, we can't actually write HTML in JavaScript. It's not valid syntax. And so the version of our HTML that works in JavaScript is JavaScript objects. So we use JavaScript objects to represent our HTML page. And it's all the same content. So you can have heading tags and divs and forms and inputs and all that stuff. We can represent all that content in your HTML page in JavaScript objects. And that's what the DOM is it's basically a representation of all of your HTML in JavaScript. And when you load up a web page, your web browser already has access to the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript. And your JavaScript is going to be, it's going to have access to all of your HTML through a global variable called document, and we'll get to that. So yeah, we have HTML inside JavaScript now, and you can use the JavaScript to interact with your HTML. So the DOM allows for, this is kind of, what is the purpose of interacting with your HTML using JavaScript? It allows you to have more unique and interactive user interfaces, full-blown web apps, and you can update your HTML based on data from the backend. And I think that's honestly my last slide. Yeah, that's my last slide. So just kind of a basic overview of what is the DOM. It's your HTML represented in JavaScript. And just a really quick, I brought up a couple web pages to see, well, I started to, examples of web pages that don't use JavaScript and then what you could do with JavaScript. So this is a website. This is just some dude's portfolio. And he could have made this, I think he did make this using just HTML and CSS. There's no interaction. You can hover over a button and it changes color, but these things, you can do all that in CSS. This whole website could have been made with HTML and CSS. There's nothing too fancy going on, and kind of the default behavior of HTML and CSS allows you to do this stuff. So, CSS does allow you to have some like animations and stuff. You could see these are animated. When you hover over these cards, there's a little bit of a timing delay between the different states. And so HTML and CSS allow you some kind of like baseline interactions in your website, but JavaScript allows you to do way more. And so some of the things you could do with JavaScript is, for example, making a full-on web app. So like if you were to go to Slack. And I don't want to show you all my Slack because I don't know, like I don't want to show everything that I have going on, but Slack, you can go on Slack on in your browser, I'm pretty sure. And you might not be able to. Or let's do Canva. Wait. Oh, Canvas. Let's do Canva. 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 Canva is that's what I've been using to make these I'd have to log in and stuff. Um Canva is gonna they have like an app, like a desktop app. And so I can say continue in browser. So I have the desktop app, but here's Canva inside um, my web browser. And it's a full-on app. So continue in browser. Um, so you can do all sorts of cool stuff. You could do, creating a presentation, which is what I've been doing, creating presentations inside of Canva. Um, it's way more involved than just a default website. And the only way you could do all this stuff, and it keeps asking me to open my app. The only way you can like have this level of interaction in the browser is using JavaScript. And if I were to actually inspect this page, there would be a lot of um, HTML elements, and you can actually like this entire app is made using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And that's kind of the basic idea I'm trying to present is that um, doing a complicated app in your web browser, which is also known as a web app, is only possible because of JavaScript, or because we could use JavaScript to interact with our HTML, the DOM. So let's actually write some code in the DOM. Um, so I'll bring up this site that I've kind of been working on, BMO's portfolio. And I'll open it up in I like to use incognito when I'm doing um, coding stuff because it doesn't run your browser extensions, and your browser extensions can sometimes um, mess with your code. Um, okay, so I already implemented the stuff from the assignment, and so um, I guess I could do a quick rundown of basic stuff in the DOM, and then we can run through how I made something like this. So I have BMO's homepage. I took out all the rest of the content, so it's just a little more simple. And this is the JavaScript that allows it to work. And then, so I have a form here, and I can type in my name, my email, my message, hit submit, and then it creates this new section here with a message in it. And with this message, I can actually edit it. And then it changes. And I can remove it. And if I remove it, then it removes that whole section. And so what allows me to, basically that was, this is its own like brand new HTML element. And I didn't create this element by hard coding it into my HTML. You can see I have this section for messages, and it has an unordered list that's empty. And then this unordered list here, if I were to show it as it's rendered in my website, um, select it like that. This unordered list here, same one. Now it has a list element inside it, which is this guy with all this stuff. And so that was created using the DOM. and DOM methods. And so, yeah, I'll start with just like, I'll take out that JavaScript I just wrote, and I'll start new. So I'll create a new index.js file. Oh, maybe I'll do index2.js because I don't want to delete my old one. So I'll just link it here so you can link your JavaScript file. And one cool thing to know, if you, and I'll zoom in. How's the size of all this stuff? Is the zoom level good for you all?
Looks good.
It's good.
Okay. So I'm linking my JavaScript in my HTML, and then I'm putting defer. And defer says wait until all the HTML is loaded until you run any of the JavaScript in this file. And that's important. If you don't do that, which I was just looking at a student's homework who had a bunch of, or a little bit more complicated JavaScript to get around this, basically telling the JavaScript, wait until the HTML is all loaded and then run the JavaScript. And so adding defer there allows you to basically select your HTML elements without, like it basically says defer running this JavaScript until the HTML is loaded. So that's just a little side note that it's important to have that. And now in here, I could say console.log hello world. And in my browser, I'll go to the console and we can see hello world and failed to load resource. Oh, the font. We can ignore that. Okay, so we have hello world showing up. So now if I were to do that multiple times, showing up again. So now our JavaScript is being run in the browser. It's being loaded in via our HTML. And so in our JavaScript now, we can interact with the HTML elements. And so there's kind of a few of the most important DOM element or DOM like methods that we're gonna go over. So first we're gonna talk about selecting elements in your HTML page. And then we could talk about creating and deleting elements. We can also talk about changing, and you can see I have GitHub Copilot on, which is my AI programmer. And I'm going to disable it for now because it's giving me all the answers and I don't want to cheat. Okay, so basic DOM methods. We're going to go over selecting elements in the HTML, changing them, creating and deleting elements, and then we could also do event listeners. And there might be other ones that'll come up, but for now, this is kind of the most important ones that come to me off the top of my head. So the way you do all of these, like basically the first entry step into doing anything with the DOM is you have to select an HTML element in your JavaScript and put it in a variable. And so I'm going to say, let's think of which of these elements we want to change. Let's try to change this this, what is it, an H2? Yeah, let's try to change that H2 right there that says leave a message. We could try changing the text of that. And so I'm going to find it in my HTML here, this H2, leave a message. So we're going to start by just trying to get this HTML element in our JavaScript. And so we're going to use some selectors for that. And so under selecting elements, we want to select that H2. And so we start by getting the like the base element, which is called document. So document is a global variable in JavaScript, and it has all the array methods or all of the DOM methods similar to array methods. They're DOM methods, and they come default, and they allow us to do all this cool interaction with the HTML. And so the base HTML element is called document, and then that's kind of our starting point. And from there, we can do all sorts of cool stuff. So first, let's select this section because it has an ID. And selecting something that has an ID is generally the easiest way to select it. And that's a good reason to add IDs to different elements. You can generally find a way to select different elements, but just like in CSS, having certain like IDs or classes or whatever, it's good to have a little handle to access it easier. And so we have this section with an ID of message form, and then we're going to select that and then go to this H2 inside. So message form is what it's called, has an ID of message form. So I'm going to say, we're going to store it in a variable, const message section, I could call it, equals, and then we're going to use that document. And then it has a bunch of array methods or DOM methods. And the first one for selecting is query selector. And so query selector allows you to select your HTML elements, and it's basically going to take a string. And this string could be, you could put like div, and then it'll select the first div that appears in your HTML. You can also put pound sign and then like, you know, your ID, the ID of the element. And so just like in CSS, you use the pound sign for selecting an ID, you use the dot for selecting a class, and you use neither to select just the name of an element. And, you know, it'll select the first thing that matches that in your HTML. And so if we were to choose section, it would probably select, I don't have any other sections, but in your HTML and your website, you probably have a bunch of other sections. So we don't want to select by section, we want to select by the ID message form. So I'll go here and I'll say message form like that. And now this should allow us to select that this section right here. And I can actually, this is what I'll always recommend, do a console log after you do after you select an HTML element. Console log the element to make sure that it's working. And I can delete this hello world. I'm annoyed that I'm getting that error right there. I want to make it go away, but I don't know exactly how right now. I think I can make it not show. I don't know how to do it right now without, oh, I could change the font in here. Sorry, really quick, I'm gonna change that. Okay. Just making that error go away because it was having trouble loading that font. Well, it wasn't actually, it was loading it, but giving me an error. I don't know. Okay, so we selected this message section and then we console logged it out, which I'll always recommend because this is a really easy thing to like mess up. Because basically what you're doing is saying, I expect that I have an element, an HTML element call or with the ID of message form, but you could get that wrong. You could spell it wrong, and then all of a sudden, the rest of your code is going to be messed up. I would always recommend just double checking that you selected the right element by console logging that element out. And so we're console logging, and you can see here in our console now, we can see that we have that section element with message form. And now we want to get that H2 right there. And so you can actually select, so this top one, this is selecting using the global document element. And that's just going to be like your HTML element, like this HTML. That is, that's what this is. And because, you know, basically your HTML element is just another element. It's just like your base element. Every other element is going to have these same methods. So we can actually use query selector on any of these HTML elements that we select. So we selected our message section, and we can actually use our message section variable now to select the H2 inside of it. So I could say const message header or heading equals, and I could do document.query selector, but let's do message section dot query selector. And then it'll only be selecting elements that are inside the this. Oh, deleted my console log, so it's not going to show anymore. And for this, we only have one H2 inside this, so I can just say H2. And so now we're selecting the type of element that's an H2 inside our message section. And I can console log that out to make sure we got that right. There we go. So our leave a message heading is actually, we're selecting it in our JavaScript. And so that's kind of this is the basics of selecting the elements you want. And for interacting with elements in your JavaScript, the most important thing is knowing how to actually select specific elements that you need. So query selector is how you do that. There's also a couple other ones. You can use document.get element by ID. You'll commonly see that. And get element by ID, you can actually, it's basically like query selector is getting this message form by ID, right? Get element by ID only gets it by ID. So I could say message form. I don't put the hashtag in there because remember, query selector can select by a bunch of different things. It's kind of the more like versatile version. Get element by ID does the exact same thing. It's just it's specific for getting an element by its ID. So query selector, and I can even put a note here. Query selector selects by anything. Get element by ID does what you would think. Selects by ID. Duh. And there's a bunch of other ones. Those are the main ones that you'll see and use. There's also query selector all, which you'll use sometimes. That is if a bunch of, like if I have a bunch of H2s, it'll return all of them and it'll return them into an array. So yeah, that's the basics of selecting elements. So now we have this message heading, and let's see how we can change the message heading. So, and I'll shrink down this. So let's say we want to change this to leave your message in our JavaScript. So I could say we have this message heading now, and I could say message heading dot inner text equals whatever we want. We could say leave your message, and that will that'll do it. So that's a pretty simple one. Now that we have this element, there's all these different properties on it, and we can change those properties. Here we're setting the inner text of it to a new string. And if we wanted, we could even store the old text. We could say const original text equals message heading dot inner text, and then console log that original text. That will show us what the original text was, leave a message. And so that an HTML element dot inner text will show you what the text content is, and you can see it, you can view it, you can also change it. So here we're modifying the text of this H2. Let's see, what else can we do? We can add new styles to it. So we can change the CSS, and I'll put a comment here and say, changing the inner text. And we could do changing the styles. So we can change the CSS by doing message heading dot style. And I might get this one wrong. It's been a while since I've done this one. You know what? No shame. I'm just going to look it up. JS change element style. Okay, style dot property equals new style. So style dot color equals red. Okay. So we have our message heading dot style, and then style is going to have dot and then all the normal CSS properties. You could do color, you could do background color. They're going to be in, so in CSS, when you're writing CSS, you could see like if you have background color, it's background dash color. And in JavaScript, that will be, so this is called kebab case, which is funny, but kebab case because these things are like being skewered by these dashes. The dash is like the kebab or the skewer, and then the words are on it. So these are in kebab case, and then when you select them in JavaScript, they're actually going to be changed to camel case, which is, you could do like background and then uppercase C color. Just something to keep in mind. It's not background dash color like it is in CSS. It's background uppercase C color. And I could change the background color to red, which will look really bad. So that is changing the styles. This you may or may not want to do. Another good way to do it is adding CSS classes. So we could say message heading dot class list dot add, and then this takes in an argument that's the name of the class we want to add. So you can do dot class name and then give it a string that's the basically like which I think you all know. If I had like this H2 and I had a class, which you would use for CSS, you could say, you know, main heading or whatever. And then we could use CSS to select something that has the class of main heading. So I could say dot main heading. This is in CSS. I could say color equals green, and that didn't change it. I probably have, let's see, did I add it? Yeah, it's not getting applied. Let me troubleshoot really quick. Class, main heading. Oh, is that the wrong CSS? I wonder why that isn't working. Maybe if I put important. This is how you, yeah, it's not getting applied. Oh, it might be because I'm setting the class name to nothing. Yep, that's it. Okay. So in my JavaScript, I already was saying message heading dot class name equals this empty string. So it was saying, even though I added this class here, setting the class name to an empty string in my JavaScript will take away any classes that it has on it. And you could reset this with a string of your own. So anyways, what I'm showing you is you could say class and then make a class for it. And it could be like, green. And then I could go in here and make a class called green. And then anything I want to be green, I can just apply the class green on it. And so I could say here, I don't want to hard code that in my HTML, but I could set the class name here to green in my JavaScript, and then it'll have that class name. So this is changing the CSS classes for an HTML element. We can change the individual styles, but we can also add and remove CSS classes. And where this might be used is if you had like a class that's like dot display or dot hide. If you had a class called dot hide, you can do display none. And now anything with this class dot hide is not going to be displayed. Display none will hide something. And so now I could say dot class name equals hide, and it will actually make that element disappear. So that's a common thing you might do in your JavaScript if you want to hide or show HTML elements. You can have a class called hide and then add or remove it. So this is one way. This is how you change the entire string of classes. So if we wanted two classes, we could do hide and green, and that'll add both of those classes onto it. Probably the more common way to do it is message heading dot class list dot add, and that way it doesn't override all of the, if you had ones already hard coded in your HTML. This way it'll just add new ones to the string. So we could do, if we had green already, so it's green, and this is going to end up looking so bad. So I apologize for that. Whatever, it's okay. So you could do class list dot add, and then you could do a string called hide or remove. And then we could remove green because green is already added. So adding or removing CSS classes, one thing we can do in JavaScript. You can do it using dot class name property, which allows you to change the entire string that represents all the classes, or you can do class list dot add or class list dot remove. So JavaScript interacting with HTML, also interacting with CSS on that HTML. And it's awesome. It's great. Okay, so we changed the text content. Let's say that I'm going to say there's one more really important one here, which is inner HTML. So inner HTML is a way to create HTML using a string. So this is nice because we could just say, say we want to add another paragraph element within this section. So in our message section that we grabbed up here, say we wanted to add a paragraph element inside of it with a bunch of text. One way we could do that is saying message section, which remember we selected up here. We selected that, and then we selected the H2 inside of it. But we're just gonna use the parent element, the container for all this stuff. We're gonna say message section dot inner HTML. Oh, this is actually this is gonna mess everything up, and I'll show you why. So the inner HTML of this element, this is the parent container of everything, and so it contains all of this stuff. If I set the inner HTML to an empty string, all of this stuff will go away. And I'll show you that. So message section dot inner HTML equals an empty string. That means all of the HTML that was inside this section is gone. It's being replaced by an empty string. That's how you can get rid of like delete entire portions of HTML. Setting it to an empty string. But you can also create and yeah. So we do that, and then we can also create HTML by doing message section dot inner HTML equals, and then in this string we can actually write HTML, and it'll be rendered as actual HTML. So I can do H2, and remember we're used to writing HTML in its own file like this. All of this is valid HTML inside of a string in JavaScript if we set that string equal to the inner HTML. So I could do H2 hello, and now we have an H2 element that has the text hello. So this is like the very literal way of changing your HTML using strings in JavaScript. And it's actually it's bad for like security. So if you were making a website and somehow the end user, like the person using your website, was like aware of how to use HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and they were a hacker, they could, if you were setting the inner HTML, they could potentially set it to something that would like run JavaScript. They could set it to a script tag. And in a script tag, they could actually write new JavaScript and it'll run that JavaScript. I think that's how they do it. There's a way that hackers will abuse this. And so it's like a security concern. But on smaller applications, it's totally fine to use inner HTML. Just something to note that it can be basically an attack vector for hackers. But for us, for what we're doing, it's great. It's fine. And another cool thing we could do, I could even copy. So I deleted this, right? I set the inner HTML of this whole section to an empty string. So all this stuff is not showing anymore. I could just copy that and put it in this string here. It's going to look a little crazy. Oh, I need to, because there's double quotes inside of it, I need to escape those. And so I can set this to use backticks. So that would be good use for backticks here. And now I can just paste all of that HTML I had, and it'll actually reset the HTML to whatever's in there. This you probably wouldn't want to do, but it's interesting. It's good to know you can do that if you want. So this inner HTML, it can be a string of however much HTML you want. You can copy your entire HTML file if you wanted. And okay, so that's, and this is actually, we're going to move on to creating and deleting elements. This is one way to do it. using inner HTML. A better way to do it, a more safe way, is using document.createElement. And then we can pass in a string. So this is a method on, remember, with all the DOM stuff, kind of the entry point is document, this global variable that allows us all these methods for interacting with our HTML. And so far, all this stuff we've been doing, we're using an object that was returned, at the very base level, we use document to access all of this stuff. So all this HTML stuff, the entry point to get access to any of it is through document. Document also, so it has a query selector and it has get element by ID. It also has create element. And so this will create a new JavaScript element, say h1, and then we could store it in a variable, const new heading. Name that whatever you want. Document.create element h1. And then if I were to console log that out, it's an h1. So we created an h1 just there. But important, this h1 is not going to show up on our web page. Part of the reason is because it doesn't have any text inside of it. So we could add text. We could say new heading. And we can interact with this new heading that we just created using create element. We can interact with it the same way as we interacted with this element that we grabbed that was already hard-coded into the HTML. We can interact with this new one that we just created using JavaScript in the same ways. So we can say new heading dot inner text equals I am a new heading. But we can see it's still not showing up. And the reason is because when you create an element, it exists in our JavaScript, but it doesn't exist in our HTML yet. And so we actually need to add this to our HTML. And we can't just add it. We need to tell it where to go. And so we need to use, if we want to add a new HTML element, we need to use our existing HTML elements that we've selected, or we just need to select a new one. We need to have access to an HTML element that exists in the DOM already, and then place this new one that we just created somewhere in reference to that one. And so we have an HTML element called message section that exists in our DOM. And so I could say message section dot, and then let's see, creating and deleting elements. I'm going to say part of that is adding new elements to the DOM. So message section dot, and then this is where we have append, and we have append child. Append child is a very common one you'll see. I was just learning about the difference between append and append child. It doesn't really seem to matter that much. Append child is great. And what that does is it says, so append means put something on the end. And then child means put it inside. So we're going to put a new element inside of our message section. So not after the message section, but inside the message section. And we're going to append it to the end of all of the children. So if there's any children already in message section, which a child is, like we have our message form section. This H2 is a child of it. This form is a child of it. These things are grandchildren of it. And I know it's fun. We use family names. It's great. I think this would be considered a grandparent of a label. So it's parents and children and grandparents and grandchildren and stuff. So append child says any direct descendants of this section is a child. Append child is going to put it at the end of any direct descendants. And this form is the direct descendant of this section. And so we're going to add this new, if we use append child, we're going to add a new element as the last child element. So I could say append child, and then we pass in this new element we just created, new heading. And then it appears in our DOM. So that is adding a new element to the DOM. Okay. How are you all feeling? Let's see. I forgot to check chat last time, and okay. Cool. Okay, deep breath. We're going to move on to event listeners, which this is what you're going to end up using for this assignment in a big way, and they can be a little bit daunting. So buckle up, but it's going to be great. So event listeners, and I'll just put a little description beforehand. They basically say code that runs when user interacts with the page, let's just say. So if you want some code to run when the user does something, like the user clicks on this heading, if you want something to happen when the user clicks on this, or, eventually, like I have this hamburger menu right here, eventually I would want to make it so that when the user clicks on it, it might create a little mobile menu that we can see that would show up. And the way we do that is we would use an event listener and say, when a user clicks on this element, do something, create a bunch of new HTML elements and load them onto the page into the DOM. And so event listeners, I guess the name of it is pretty self-explanatory. They listen for an event. An event is anything, could be hover, could be click, could be form submit, all sorts of stuff that we can listen for. And the syntax is where it starts to get kind of confusing. I'll try to make the most simple event listener we can just to start, and then we can see where it goes from there. So let's see, we have.
Could we maybe use the form that you made like for your page? Because I think that's like most in line with our assignment. Or are you trying to show us something else?
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Let's start just doing the assignment, because that's definitely like probably the best way right now we can learn what all this stuff does. So
Thank you.
yeah. And I'll make an index3.js to start that, just so I can, or actually what I'll do a git commit so I can save this work and then delete it. So I'm going to do git add all, git commit um, demo DOM stuff. And now that I have a commit, I can delete all this stuff. And I can always go back. So let's start with this assignment. And I know that I'm going to go over time. And feel free to leave or stick around. It's up to you. But we're just going to start going through this. So maybe I'll pull this up over here. And oh, I can't put that. Oh, I was in an incognito tab over here, and you can't have an incognito window and a normal one next to each other. Okay. So yeah, we're not doing promises yet. We could, but we're doing DOM stuff. Okay, so the first step is we're gonna open our index.html file. Above the footer element, add an empty section element. So I did that. Some of this HTML stuff I already added, and so I'm gonna cruise through it. So I added this section. I think you all made your footer element using JavaScript, maybe. So you might not have a footer element in your HTML. So I created this section for the message. Inside the new section element, and I can zoom in on this. Um, okay. Create a variable named message form. Oh, wait. All right, here we are. Okay. So we created a new section element. We put a form inside of it. Or we created a level 2 heading that says leave a message right here. We added a form element with a name attribute equal to leave a message, or just leave underscore message. So that's here, this form. Inside this form, we have inputs with the type text, name, user's name, and required equal to true. We have two inputs, one for the username and one for the user email, and you can see those here, name, email. A text area for the message. A text area is basically just an input, except it's bigger. A button with type equal to submit. If type equals submit and the button is inside a form, then clicking on the button will do something called submitting the form. And submitting the form is the event we're going to listen for. Each form should have a corresponding label. Okay, so I put a bunch of labels in here for each input. You can put the input inside of the label tag, or you can put the label tag outside of it and then have a for attribute. And the for attribute needs to have the name of the input that it's a label for. So this label is going to be for the element with the ID of user's name. I think it's based on the ID. It could be the name. I think it's the ID though. Okay, so that's our HTML. And then I didn't use, this basically says that's an HTML element, what is it, line break or something? I forgot what it stands for, but it's an easy way to align things vertically instead of horizontally. Okay, so now we're getting to the actual JavaScript, I think. Oh, no, we added this. An empty section just has an H2, and this is going to be where our messages are loaded into this unordered list. And so now handle message form submit. This is where we're onto our JavaScript. So we're opening our JavaScript file, and we're going to create a variable called message form using DOM selection to select the leave message form by name attribute. So what's that asking? Basically, this form right here, we want to select this in our HTML. And if you remember, I was just showing you the different ways to select. So we can use query selector. So I could say const, what does it want us to name it? Message form. Can zoom in. Const message form equals document dot query selector. Just full screen that. Document dot query selector. Now this query selector, because it wants us to select by the name, it's going to be, we can't use the pound, right? The pound would be selecting by ID. Select by name, it's actually not one of the like default ways of selecting that's included in one of these. And so you have to use this crazy syntax. You have to do square brackets for any attribute. We're going to select the name attribute where the name is equal to, and then single quotes, and find this form. What's the name? Leave underscore message. So we're going to select an element with a name attribute of leave message. And I had to look that up the first time. That's a more complicated select that we have to do, but you can do it. And so now let's console log to see if this message form is working, which I would always suggest. So console log, open up our console. And yeah, there it is. So we're logging out this message form. That's the first step. Now on to the next, add an event listener to the message form element that handles the submit event. So here's where we're getting to the event listeners. And so with this message form, we can add an event listener, add event listener, and add event listener is a method that you can add to any HTML element, and you're going to listen for a specific event. And then the way you determine what that event is you put quotes and then the name of the event, and the name is going to be submit in this case. You could do click or hover, but here we're doing submit. So now we have an event listener. This is listening for when the form is submitted. And then the next thing we pass in, and the syntax gets kind of crazy, we're going to pass in a function. And you've seen with array methods, we were passing in like an arrow function or an anonymous function into another function. That's what we're doing here. The event listener says we're listening for the submit event. And then the second argument is going to be, and I'm going to do arrow functions like that. So now this function will run whenever you hit submit. And I could check it by doing console.log form submitted. So now remember, this whole part is just a function. It's an arrow function, so the syntax looks crazy. And it runs when someone hits submit. And so let's try that out. Submit. Oh, I have required on these, so. Cool. So we hit submit, it console logged, and it's not showing. And the reason is because the page reloaded. When you submit a form, the default behavior is your whole page reloads. That's part of HTML. HTML forms just do that by default. And we actually don't want that behavior. And so that's a common thing when you're doing an event listener on a form submit. And this isn't something I would expect you all to know. This is just, it's part of the instructions in the homework. And it's something you learn. And the way to prevent the page from reloading when you submit the form is you have to, and generally with an event listener, with any event listener, you would put event right here. And you'll sometimes see that called E, or even like EVT or EVNT, I don't know. You'll sometimes see E, that's what I've seen, but you can also put event. This is a parameter into our arrow function, and it'll get passed in when someone submits the form. This event will actually be an object that contains information about the event. And so the event was a submit event. And if we do event.prevent default, that will make sure that our form submission doesn't reload our page. And that's just one of those things and so you can see it didn't reload our page now, and we can see the console log showing up. Which is good. So that's the first step. And just to make sure I'm following along with the instructions. So we added an event listener inside the callback, create 3 new variables, 1 for each of the 3 form fields, and retrieve the value from the event. So we already grabbed the event here, and we said prevent default, which I think is one of these steps. Get to it later. So we're going to grab some variables from this event, and the event basically is going to contain all of the inputs that the user put in. So the name, the email, and the message are going to be contained in the event. So we're going to do event.target dot, and then we can use the name in HTML for each of these inputs. So the name for our first input was user's name, like that. So if we do event.target.user's name, and we store that in a variable, user's name equals event.target.user's name. If we console log that out, that should show us whatever the user typed in. And we can verify that. So if I type in that, not getting what I expected. Oh, it needs to be event.target.value. I think, wait, how did I do it again? Event.target.user's name. Oh, event.target.user's name.value. So dot user's name is going to give us the input element, and then dot value is going to give us the actual value typed in. And that's going to go. Okay. So the name that I entered here is getting retrieved on this line, event.target.user's name.value is retrieving whatever the user typed into the input right here. And then when I hit submit, it runs this function, all this code. We're preventing the page from reloading, and we're getting the user's name, this value that they entered. And we want to get the other ones too. And it's the same process. So we're getting the user's name. We also want to get the user's email. So event.target.user's email.value is going to give us their email. And then last, the user's message. Event.target.user's message.value. So this is getting all the values of these inputs. And then with those values, once we get those in our JavaScript, then we can create new HTML elements based on those inputs. So let's see, going down this list. Inside the callback function, create 3 new variables, 1 for each of the 3 form fields, and retrieve the value from the event. So we just did that here. Event.target is the form, and event.target.user's name is the first input element. Inside the callback function for your event listener, add the console.log statement to log the 3 variables you created. So we can console log all those. User's name, user's message, and user's email. So they're not going to run on their own. I need to submit the form, and then they'll run. So I'm going to say my name is Rio Edwards. My email is that. Hello, this is my message. And then I can submit. And you can see our console logs are logging. They're basically verifying that these variables we just got contain the information from all these inputs. That's what we want. So that was that step. Save and refresh your browser. We have live server running, so we don't need to refresh. Open the console in your browser if you haven't already. So we looked in the console and we saw that we're console logging the variables. Yeah, so this is just saying test what you just did. At this point, you should notice that the browser is refreshing automatically when you submit your form. So I did this out of order. This is where it's asking to add prevent default. And prevent default will allow the rest of this code to run and not have the page reload, which is good. Actually, it would reload this code, or it would run this code, but then the page would refresh, which we don't want. Okay, at this point, you should notice the form is submitting properly, but the form fields are not reset after submit. Okay, so when we submit, all these fields still have the text that we entered. And so they're next gonna tell us to clear the form. So inside the callback function on the very last line, add a new line to clear the form, use the reset method. So what they're saying here is message form dot reset. And it's a method. So now forms have a reset method that resets all the inputs. So I could re-enter these, blah. And now after I submit, we get the values, but then it actually resets the form. Okay. Display messages in list. Okay. So now in the next step is going to be, we want to create new HTML using these values that we just got. So in the index.js file, start inside the event listener callback function on the line above where you reset the form. So they want us to start here, not below the reset. Create a variable called message section and use DOM selection to select the messages section by ID. So const message section equals, and then we can do document dot query selector. And I'm going to go back to my HTML and just remember what we're selecting. We're selecting this section right here because we want to create a new message and load the message into this unordered list here. And so we're going to select the parent element, which has an ID. It's just an easier way of accessing the child elements inside of it. So we're going to select this section, which has an ID of messages. So we're going to do document.querySelector and then pass in a string that says hashtag for ID, right? And then messages. So I'm going to console log that out just to make sure that that's working. Message section, and we're expecting when I fill out the form and submit it, we're going to see the message section console log. So there we go. So we're verifying that we just got the element we wanted, which has an unordered list inside that we're going to put this new message into. Create a variable called message list and use DOM selection to query the message selection instead of the entire document to find the UL element. What that's basically saying is we have the message section now. We have this element, this parent element. Now we want to get this UL, and we can use a query selector. Instead of on the whole document, we can use a query selector just on this message section and select for a UL. So I can do that here. I'll say const message list equals, and then we're going to do the query selector again, but we're going to select just from the message section. So message section dot query selector, and we're going to select the unordered list. And I always double check. because it's best to, or else you'll run into problems later down the line and you're like, why isn't this working? It's because you did a query selector and for some reason it didn't work. And so we're checking, we have the UL now. So that's what we want. So that worked. This is done. Create a variable named new message that makes a new list item element. Okay, so if you remember, I showed you how to make a new element using document.createElement. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to say const new message equals document.create element. And then we can create an element. The type of element that we create depends on a string that we pass in. And so if we were to pass in an A, that would create an A tag, an anchor tag. If we did P, that would be a P tag. We're doing LI. We're going to make a list item element. On the next line, set the inner HTML of your new message element with the following information. Okay, so now inner HTML, which again is how we, it's one way to create new elements or just modify the content inside an element. And so this new message we just created, we're going to do new message.inner HTML. And then inner HTML, we use strings. So we're going to use a string. And whatever we put in the string here, we could write some HTML. And then inside this li element, we're going to have some other HTML. And what is it asking for? Well, they want an anchor tag that displays the username and a span element. So let's start with the anchor tag. I'll just start writing. So we're doing an A tag, and it displays the username or the user's name. So we have these variables that we got from the form. So whatever the user typed into the name input right here, that's the value we want. And we want to make this A tag have that value that the user typed in here. And so we already are getting that value here and storing it in this variable called user's name. And just to unclutter, I'm going to delete these console logs. So we're getting the user's name. Now we want the value inside of this A tag to be the user's name. And if we did it just like that, that wouldn't work because this is just a hard-coded string called user's name. So we actually want to use a template string. And so I can change these to backticks. And then we can do curly braces and the $sign. So now this is a template literal. And then we're passing in the user's name. Displays the user's name and is a clickable link to the user's email. So this an A tag is a link. And we want to link to whatever the user just entered into the email box. And so the way to do that is href equals, and then we're going to use another template literal. We're going to do the $sign curlies and then user's email. But then there's one other thing. It's saying hint use the mail to prefix. Actually, I just added. The mail to prefix is something that you add inside an anchor tag right there before the basically an anchor tag can link to a URL like another website, or it can link to someone's email. And if you use mail to and then someone's email, colon, and then someone's email, it'll actually open up the person's like default email and create a new email to that person. You'll see. That's the syntax right there. I think. I hope I got it right. I don't use it very often, but let's try it. Oh, wait. We're not going to be able to, we're not going to be able to check yet because this isn't added to we haven't added this new message to the DOM yet. So that's going to be one of the next steps. This part, it could be wrong, but we're gonna check it once we get through this. So, okay, so we're setting the inner HTML of this list element or this list item to this anchor tag with the user's email. And then it wants one other thing. It wants a span that displays the user's message. So we're gonna we have this A tag here, and just to be a little bit more like readable, I'm gonna put this on one line. And so the string is starting here, ending here, and then we have this tag here. I'm gonna do another line. It's all one string, but this is just another way to format it to where it's a little bit easier to read. We're doing a span here. So we're going to do an anchor tag with a span next or right after it. And this is all inside this new message element we're creating. The span element that displays the user's message. So we've already used the user's email or the user's name, the user's email, and now we need the user's message. And we're going to put that inside this span. So $, curly braces, and then user message. And now, oh, there's even more. We're adding more things to this new message. This new message list item is going to have all sorts of stuff on it. It's going to have a remove button. Actually, I'm going to skip this step, the remove button. I'm going to add this element to our to the DOM just so we can see it, and then we can add the button. So I'm going to skip this step and come back to it. So append the new message to the message list element. That's what I want to do now. So just so that we can see this new message showing up in the DOM. So I'm going to say this message list, which is the UL right here. We want to put this new list item we just made inside of here. So I'm going to say message list dot append child. So that's how you add a new child element. And we're going to add this new message that we just created. And so now when we submit the form, I'm expecting our name, email, and message that we just added to be put inside this A tag and this span inside an LI tag, and then the LI tag will be put inside the message list. Oh, and really quick, ignore this. I have this section with the messages. I have it hidden by default, which is part of the stretch goals. I'm going to unhide it really quick. So I'm going to search for none. Display none. Yeah, on the messages section. I'm going to comment that out. So now we're actually getting this message section showing. Okay. Message list.append child, new message. So now when I submit this form, we're going to expect a new LI element to appear in this section. Cool. Look at that. That's my new element that I just created. I created this element using JavaScript. So document.createElement new message. I set the inner HTML of that message to be an anchor tag and a span with some specific values that we got from the form. So this is some dynamically created HTML, and then we're loading it into the DOM right there. And it looks nice because I've already added CSS styles classes to all this. When you do it on your own, it's likely that these new elements you create are going to look bad at the start because I made the styles already before this, but you can always create these and then add styles after. But anyways, this is the new message. And if I click on my username, because this is an A tag, I here and inspect, if I look, this right here is an A tag with an href with mail to rioredwards@gmail.com, which is the email that I entered into here. The name is Rio Edwards, which is what I entered here. And then the message, hello, this is my message, is what I entered there. If I click on the link, this A tag right here, you'll see what happens. This is the mail to thing. Takes me to Gmail. I'm in an incognito tab, so it's not gonna be logged in. But if I were logged in, it would create a new email to me from me.
That was a lot. Thank you so much for walking us through that. Much, much
Yeah,
appreciated.
yeah. How are you all feeling? I haven't done a check-in in a minute. I can keep going and finish the assignment. I can leave off here either way. If all of you are like getting a lot out of it, then I'm happy to. Oh, I guess that is pretty much. I want to finish and do the remove button. So y'all can stay or leave. I won't be offended either way. I just want to finish this off by creating the remove button. And I could even do the stretch goals too. The stretch goals I did, they take a little bit. they're a lot, but I could do this too. How are you all feeling? Thumbs ups or thumbs downs?
I'm okay for finishing the assignment. You don't have to do the stretch goals if you don't want to. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, I was gonna say this
sounds
is
good.
really helpful. I'm all for finishing for sure.
Cool. Okay. So we're almost done. And I know it's a lot. I'll try to do like one last run through to just kind of explain what each line does again once we see it all, because it's easy to get lost in the weeds here. So remember we skipped this step right here and also this one. And the reason is because I just wanted to see this message showing up. Now, before we add the message to the DOM, and I can put a comment here that says add new message to the DOM. And by DOM, you know, like I was saying, DOM is basically HTML. The DOM is the representation of your HTML in JavaScript. So DOM, add to the HTML, same thing as add to the DOM. But in JavaScript, you call it the DOM. Okay, so before we do this, we want to add one more thing to this message. We want to add a delete button. And not only are we adding a delete button, but we're going to add an event listener to the delete button that listens for a click and deletes the message when we click. So if you remember, we have this message form with an event listener for submit. So now inside this whole thing, we're going to do another event listener on this new delete button that we make. And it's going to get a little crazy, but okay, so create a new variable named remove button that makes a new button element. So const remove button equals document.create element. Resize this a little bit. Where are we? Here we are. Okay. Create a new variable named remove button that makes a new button element. Set the inner text to remove. Okay, so we created a new element. Oh, wait, we're not finished with that yet. Document.create element, pass in a string saying what type of element we want to create. We want to create a button. With this remove button, we want to set the inner text to remove. So remove button dot inner text equals remove. We have an undercase R right there. Set the type attribute to button. Oh, how do you do that again? Remove button dot attributes. Is that it? Dot type. This could be wrong. I'll show you something. Or wait, I do have the version I reviewed. So this is good. Remove button dot type. So that's just how you set it. So not dot attributes, it's just remove button dot type equals button. And now we need to add an event listener to the button, which is yeah, lots of nested crazy code going on here. But this event listener is going to listen for a click on the delete button, and it kind of makes intuitive sense. We're making a message, and then we want to be able to click on a button that says delete on each message, and that delete button should have some functionality to actually delete the message, because it won't do it by default. We need to add that in JavaScript. So we're going to say remove button dot add event listener. And so add an event listener to the remove button that handles the click event. So add event listener, remember the first parameter it takes is a string that represents the type of event, and that's going to be click. And then we do comma, and then the second parameter we pass in, the second argument is actually a function, and I use arrow functions for these. That's typically what you'll see. You sometimes can see, I could do it the other way too to show you. You sometimes will see that. It's the same thing. It's different syntax. This is, what do you call it? Just a regular anonymous function, I think. And then that's an arrow function. Same thing. Maybe I'll use this one so you can get variety, because up here I used an arrow function. And so we're listening for a click, and then we're going to run this function. Inside the callback function, create a variable named entry that finds the button's parent element using DOM traversal. Whoa, that's crazy. Basically, this remove button needs to be able to help us indicate what message it's part of. It's part of this li here, or it's going to be. It's going to be part of the list element, or the list item that we create. And so that is the parent node. And so like document.query selector is how you get children nodes of nodes, but we can also get a parent node. And so we're going to do, we're going to store it in a variable, const entry equals, and we're going to do remove button dot, or wait, I think we can do remove button, but I think we can also use E or event. This is another way that I think they might prefer. So we're listening for an event, click. This event property is going to have all the details of the event. It's a bunch of stuff, but the thing we want is what element was clicked. And it's obvious, of course, where we clicked on the remove button. That's what triggered this. And the way to get the element that this event listener is on is by using event.target. So that will give us the remove button. And then once we have the remove button, we can get the parent node. by using parent node. And I think this will work. I might have to do it the other way that I did it last time, but we'll try this. So just to make sure that it works, I'm going to console log entry. And so basically, we're going to add a list item using this form. We're going to fill out this form, hit submit. It's going to create this new list item. It's going to have a span, the A tag. Oh, it's not going to have the remove button yet because we haven't added the remove button to the list element. I want to test it, and so I'm just going to add that. The way to do it is you can do li, and I'll show you which step we're doing right here. We're skipping to this step. Append the remove button to the new message element. Hint, use append child. So it's the same way we added the li, or we added the new message to the message list. We're going to add this remove button to the new message. So we're going to say new message dot append child remove button. So we're appending this button that we just made to the actual message. And I'm doing that. I'm skipping to that because I want to be able to test what happens when I click on this button. I want to make sure that we can console log the parent node of the button, which should be the message. So I'm going to fill this out. Message equals my cool message. Submit. Cool. So we have this remove button now, which we just created, appended it to the new message, and then we appended the new message to the message list. And so the remove button is showing up here now. And when I click on this remove button, it's not going to do anything yet because that's the functionality we're adding here. But what it will do is hopefully console log the parent node, which should be the li. So I'm going to hit that, and yep. So the parent node of this button right here is this li. And so we're getting this li, and then we want to delete it. I hope that makes intuitive sense. We made this remove button. When we click it, this function runs, any code in here. And then we're accessing the element, the whole message element, and now we want to remove the message element. And we can use, let's see. So we did this. We got the parent node, which is the actual message itself. Remove the entry element from the DOM using the remove method. So we're storing entry in here. Entry is really going to end up being the same thing as new message. It's just that variable. And so we're going to do entry dot remove. And that should remove the entire thing, the entire message when I hit that button. So let's try it. So I'm going to hit remove, and we're going to expect this whole message to disappear. And it did. So that's the end of the assignment, basically.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
This one is complicated.
I know.
So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a lot. You're using a bunch of stuff that is pretty new and a bunch of stuff that's completely new. And yeah, it can get pretty complicated. And the good news is you'll move on to React eventually, and then well, you might. If you learn React, you pretty much never have to use DOM methods at all. And that's not to say it's necessarily easier. React is its own whole thing, but React basically removes the need to do all this DOM stuff yourself. It does it for you. But it is good to know. It's important to know how to do all this stuff. So I'm thinking instead of doing the stretch goals, I'm just going to wrap it up because the stretch goals are honestly a lot more involved and they might just make it more confusing. So I'm probably going to leave it as it is. I'll do one last just kind of like walkthrough, just explaining kind of how this all works. And then I'll put this into a Replit and link to it on Slack so you all can see the code.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I started by making this section, which you can see here. Wait, I'm going to shrink that page down. Okay, so I started by making this section, message form, that contains the form. So all of this stuff right here, leave a message, name, email, message, submit. That's this HTML I made. And it allows you to, fill out a form and then leave a message. Hit submit and it leaves a message. This second section down here, we leave empty because the messages, this UL that's going to contain the messages, we want to fill that in dynamically using information that the user submitted into this form. So that's the new HTML we added. And my HTML is basically just that. I just left my heading, and all of you will have a whole bunch more HTML in your page, and this will be at the end. Moving on to the JavaScript. The first thing we do is we need to get the message form using, so use DOM selectors to get the form element. So the form is the parent element that has all of these inputs and the submit button. It's the whole form. And we're going to use document.querySelector. This is a complicated query selector. You usually don't get this complicated with them, but we're selecting an element that has the name attribute of leave message. So we get that element, which again is this form right here. With that form, we now add event listener to form so we can let's see. It's a good way to kind of summarize all that we're doing in here so that we can get the user's input values and create new messages using them. So this event listener is listening for when the user submits the form, and then any code that runs in this whole thing, pretty much most of the code we just wrote today, all of this is inside this event listener so that when the user submits the form, all this code runs. We're creating a new message. So we're listening for the user to submit the form. We're getting the event, which the event has all sorts of information, cool information. The first thing we do is we prevent the page from reloading, which is just the default behavior. So prevent default. It's dumb, it's should be something different, but that's just how it is. Now here we're saying event.target.blah.value, event.target.users name.value, .users email.value, and .users message.value. This is getting the values that the user typed into these inputs. So access values from inputs. So whatever the user put into these form inputs, we're accessing those values and storing them in variables. Now, once we have those values that the user entered, we need to create a message using those values. And so we're going to start by, before we create the messages, we're going to select the element. Select the HTML element that will contain new messages. And that's the UL, the unordered list. So this guy right here. So we're going to select that so that we can put new messages in. So we're selecting the parent container. We're using the parent container to select the UL inside. Creating a new message. So here we are begin creating the new message element. The first step is document.createElement, which is a helper method on document that allows you to create any HTML tag. So we're creating an LI, which is going to be an LI. And for this UL, it's actually, I'll put it like that so you know it's actually an HTML element we're referring to. And then same thing with this LI here. It's an HTML element. Once we create this LI element, we're going to set the inner HTML of it to be a link to the user's email and a span, which you could use a span. You could also use a p tag. Excuse me. Okay, so we make the span tag and then put the user's message into it. And so this new message here is gonna contain the, and I could say, sorry, I'm recovering from COVID. I had COVID last week.
Bless you.
Thank you. Okay, so this new message is gonna basically adding the adding the content from users' inputs into the new LI, into the new message element. Okay. Now the remove button, which kind of just overcomplicates this, but it's fine. The remove button is going to be, well, creating a way to remove the message, creating a button to remove the new message. So here we're doing document.createElement once again, and then remove button.inner text. And so here we're basically just setting the inner text and the type of the button. We could have used inner HTML, but this is the other way of doing it. Remove button. So that's just part of creating the button, specifying the text inside and the type. Here we're creating an event listener for when user clicks remove button. So this is the code that will run when the user clicks the remove button. It'll run this function in here. And in this function, we're using the event.target, which is the button, the remove button. I can spell it. Using the event.target, which is the remove button, to access. Actually, let me just rewrite that. Access parent element of button, which is the new message element. And we could do this by just saying new message dot remove, because we already have access to the new message, right? But if we I won't explain it any further. This is just another way to do it. I can't come up with a really good reason why we wouldn't just use that variable, but this is the way they want us to do it, and that's fine. So we're getting the parent node of this remove button, and we're removing it. So access parent element of button, and then we're saying remove the message from the DOM, which that's basically, this is the functionality of the remove button, is removing the message. And we call it entry here because that's what they asked for. We could also call this like the new message we just created or whatever, but we're calling it entry. Okay, so we created this remove button. Now we need to add the remove button. So add new messages to DOM. That's this one right here. But the first step is add remove button to the new message. So if we skip this step and we tried to add a new message, no remove button. The remove button was created, but it wasn't added to the new message. So this fixes that. So now remove button is part of it. And then, so we add the remove button to the new message, and then we add the new message to the DOM. Well, to the message list, which is in the DOM. That's the UL that we want to add it to. And then at the very end, reset the form inputs. And that's it. Super easy, right? Not really. It's a lot.
Yeah, sure.
But hopefully just one line at a time and kind of conceptually you can make sense of it. Eventually I've made 100,000 to-do lists at this point, and it's basically the same, this is the same as making a to-do list app. Eventually, once you do it over and over and over, you start to like see the patterns. But I know at first it can be very, overwhelming seeing all this stuff. But that's how it all works. That's the coolness of using JavaScript, is you can create HTML dynamically and modify it dynamically. Eventually, we can connect this to a backend and then store messages in a database. And that won't be part of the intro course that we're doing here. That would be eventually when you get onto using like Express or Ruby on Rails or something, you could eventually store these messages in a database, and retrieving them and displaying them to the DOM is the first step. And so there would just be a middle step of saying, store this message in a database. But yeah, this is basically like the most important thing for interacting with the DOM is how do you create HTML elements dynamically. And we're doing that here, which is great.
Thank you, Rio. Have a good
Yep,
day.
of course. I hope you all got something out of this. And yeah, I'll post this on Replit and post the link to this recording. I could post the slides. I don't think I will because there's basically no slides, but okay. Thank you all. Yeah, message me on Slack if you need help. Okay. Thanks. Bye.